Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Zaleski Sports Show, March 9th, 2020. And that can only mean one thing, as Jason Zaleski here sits next to Steve Maves. Snow melting outside. Just got an update on my Game Changer app. That means baseball and softball is just around the corner. But, Steve, it seems like a long ways away, though, from now, as we are still deep into the throes of winter sports playoffs. Girls basketball, state teams announced. We'll talk about those during today's show. Boys basketball, sectionals are here. Starts Thursday, finishes Saturday. Wrestling wrapped up over the weekend. Gymnastics wrapped up. And that's where we will start today's show. Out of Marshfield, we had the 2019 WIAA Division I state champion Gracie Holland. And Gracie took to her disciplines again this year, again in Wisconsin Rapids, where the WIAA 2020 State Individual Gymnastics meet took place. And it was Miranda Nobby of Menominee Falls, Germantown, edged out Marshfield's Gracie Holland for the Division I state championship this year, 38.15 to 37.899. Final score there. Congratulations to Marshfield's Gracie Holland, again, all-around champion in 2019. Second place in 2020. Holland also won the Division I vault championship here in 2020. She had a score of 9.583, and that's a really high score. Bring Steve into the show now, and you don't need to know judging or any of that if you've even watched the Olympics for 2 minutes. I think people understand what's going on here. A 10 is an unattainable score, by the way. There is no such thing as a perfect anything in these sports. As a matter of fact, as soon as the gymnast in this case arranges their routine, they're docking themselves points if they're not doing the most difficult. If they don't set their difficulty setting all the way to 10 to begin with. So at any rate, 9.583, a full 1.5 points ahead of Miranda Nobby, and that is just a fantastic score, Steve.
Unreal how great, as you just mentioned, how great that is. Gracie last year, as you mentioned, all-around champion. This year, continuing that as well. First place in vault. Can't hold your head on that, or can't keep your head down on that. Gracie, a phenomenal athlete. And just watching, as you mentioned, gymnastics in the Olympics and watching a little on TV. Some of the best athletes are gymnasts. I mean, It's just fantastic how much conditioning and how much you have to be in shape, and just be able to continue that year after year. And congratulations to Gracie on a phenomenal high school career in gymnastics.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, Steve. Congratulations to Gracie. Had a chance to get to know her a little bit better last year. She was our Zaleski Sports Female Winter Sports Athlete of the Year last year. Now Gracie heads into her best season, as it turns out, which is spring sports and track and field. And that's where she'll compete at the collegiate level, or is scheduled to. So a lot yet ahead for Marshfield's Gracie Holland. Moving on to wrestling, and we had Division III wrestling in the area, and that was Stratford in the WIAA State Team Championship duel.
Surprise.
On Saturday. Yeah, surprise, right? Surprise. It was their 9th trip to the team state tournament, where they had finished in first place in 2017 and 2018, and then second in 2001, 2, 3, 16, 19, and now 2020. They fell to Fenimore on Saturday afternoon, and it was a close one against Fenimore, 37-31. And then Fenimore, though, fell to Coleman later on, and so I'm sorry, not second place. They did not finish in the top three. My apologies there. So Stratford falls out of silver territory as they fall to Fenimore in the semifinals, and then Fenimore goes on and they fall later on that day. And so Fenimore state runner-ups, Coleman state champions in Division III. take a look at that semifinal Stratford-Fenimore match. It was at 132 pounds, Max Schwabe with the pin. Connor Stutchen at 145 pounds defeated his opponent, Jacob Hayden, with the win at 152. A major decision for Devin Denny at 160. And Hunter Ford with the win at 170. And Trevor Denny and Gavin Drexler each won by forfeit again as Stratford falls to Fenimore in the semifinals, 37-31. So that's how wrestling ends up there. Again, Stratford falls in the semifinals on Saturday. All right, moving on to girls basketball. And girls basketball, the state championship seeds have been assigned, and what that means from over the weekend, it was a trio of girls basketball, area basketball teams falling on Thursday. It was Neillsville succumbing to Melrose Mindoro. Loyal fell over at Clear Lake. And, Steve, I'm missing one here.
Pacelli Marathon.
Thank you,
Yep.
Pacelli. That was the game Steve was at, and Pacelli, that's right, fell to Marathon. Only two of those three teams went on then to win on Saturday, and it is in Division 4. We'll talk about that division first, as most of the area teams fell in Division 4 and were slated in Division 4. This season, it's Aquinas. They are the number one seed. No surprise there. Returning champions from last year, and they will take on number 4 Crandon. It was Crandon who was bounced by Colby last year. So Crandon makes a return and earns their trip to state here in 2020. They play on Thursday at 6:35, and it's Melrose Mindoro who took down Neillsville. They are the 2 seed, and they will play number 3 seed Mishicot at 8 p.m. All right, Steve, that's the second stanza of the day. It's Division 3 that actually starts the whole shebang Thursday at 1:30. But Aquinas, Crandon, Melrose, Mindoro, Mishicot, and Aquinas probably the odds-on favorite in Division 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Just with the talent that they have back, we saw them at the Century Classic. We also saw Mishicot at the Century Classic as well. They took down Spash over the winter break, and Aquinas just with the coach that they have and the players that they have, like Lexi Donarski heading to Iowa State, a McDonald All-American, just one of the best women or one of the best girl basketball players that we have in the state. Crandon took down Marathon on Saturday. Melrose Mindoro, of course, took down Neillsville. And Melrose Mindoro, Mishicot should be a good one, but Aquinas, as you mentioned, odds-on favorites to win another state championship.
Yep, it was Aquinas, Melrose Mindoro in the finals last year, and if chalk holds, that's who it will be coming up on Saturday. But again, those games all start Thursday at 6:35, and then Melrose Mindoro, Mishicot approximately 8 p.m. In Division 5, it is number 1 seed Blackhawk. They were the number 1 seed last year, back at it again this year, and they will take on Wausau's Newman Catholic. That game Friday at 9 a.m. Get your donuts and coffee ready for that one. And then number 2 seed is Clear Lake. They had took down Loyal on Thursday. They go on to earn a state tournament berth, and they take on number 3 Bangor. So 1-4 Blackhawk Newman, 2-3 Clear Lake Bangor, and games tip 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Friday. Steve, I got to see Clear Lake on Thursday. That was a pretty good team. They're undefeated, so is Blackhawk, and no doubt they're the 1-2.
Yeah, I think Blackhawk has won about 50 games in a row or some, or 54 games in a row. So, again, number 1 seed, that should be Blackhawk should be the favorite going into Friday morning, but you never know. That's why they play. Blackhawk, and I think Blackhawk played Newman last year and turned them over about 20 times. And so Blackhawk is a very good team, and we'll see what Newman can do against them. A very veteran team in Newman Catholic, so we'll see what goes on Friday morning.
Essentially all the same Cardinals back there. Mackenzie Kroc, the only senior on last year's team. So, and that team had a fairly decent lead at halftime and into the second half, and then went stone cold at around, for about an 8-minute stretch, if my memory serves. So all those same girls get to go back and redemption, perhaps. As I mentioned, Division III starts the whole thing on Thursday. This is girls state basketball at the Resch Center in Green Bay. And it's number 1 seed in Division III, Platteville, 25-0, taking on number 4 seed Arcadia. That game tips at 1:35. And number 2 is Wrightstown, and they take on number 3, Lake Mills. And I'll remind folks in just a moment, we talk about the boys, why that Platteville and Arcadia score is interesting, or the matchup, I should say, and Aquinas in Division IV on Thursday. There's an interesting note about those coming up. Stay tuned for that. Again, you're listening to the Zaleski Sports Show. Jason Zaleski here. Steve Maves right there. All right, in Division I, and these semifinals take place on Friday, March 13th at 6:35 p.m. It's number 1 seed Middleton Cardinals taking on number 4 seed Oconomowoc, and the Bayport Pirates will settle up against the Divine Savior Holy Angels. That game takes place approximately 8 p.m. It was Bayport who had to outlast Spash on Thursday in an overtime contest, and Bayport and Middleton back at it again this year, Steve, as the 1 and 2 seeds, respectively, in Division I.
Yeah, and that's going to be a great matchup against Oconomowoc. Number 2 seed Bayport, Divine Savior Holy Angels is where Miss Agumbawale went. She went on to play at Notre Dame, had some huge shots in the NCAA tournament to help them win a national championship. But Bayport, very good. Middleton, obviously, the top or the 4 teams to get to state have to be good, and they're there to see what they can do. Absolutely.
All right, in Division II, as we wrap up here, this will be the first the second set on Friday, and number 1 seed Hortonville taking on 4 seed Oregon, and number 2 seed Beaver Dam taking on number 3 seed Milwaukee. Some familiar names there. In Division II, and again, that's number 1 Hortonville at 25-1, taking on Oregon at 21-5. Beaver Dam is 23-3, taking on Pewaukee 21-5. Steve, we know anything about those teams?
Hortonville and Beaver Dam played against each other last year for a state championship. Yeah. There's a lot of back and forth if Hortonville should get the number 1 seed. Beaver Dam, phenomenal last year. The Polar Bears very well should take that number 1 seed. So Beaver Dam, Hortonville should be another, if they make it there, should be another fantastic state championship on Saturday night.
All right, so a full slate of girls' state championship games coming up. Again, all those games take place at the Resch Center in Green Bay, and games are found at a TV station near you as well during those. The Resch is a fun place to go. If you can make it out to Green Bay, by all means, get out there and play. All right, I mentioned an interesting note as we're going to move now to boys basketball. We told you that Aquinas is going to play on Thursday, girls basketball. And what that means is that the number 7 seed boys Aquinas team in Division 4, well, they upset their way through the tournament, and they now play in a sectional semifinal. Those are scheduled also for Thursday. Well, you can't have teams at this. Well, I shouldn't say you can't. The WIAA does a good job of making sure that if your school has competing events going on, they place them on separate days. So Aquinas, number 7 seed, upset their way through the tournament. They took down number 2 seed Regis over the weekend, and then they met up with number 6, also upset-minded Fall Creek, and able to get past the Crickets, and they will play number 4 seed Luther. So Luther upset the number 1 seed Durand 77-60. So upsets all over the place in Section 1, Division 4. And Aquinas will play Luther in Arcadia on Wednesday. That way the entire school can empty out, go cheer on their boys Aquinas teammates on Wednesday, and then make it over to Green Bay on Thursday. So if you're a lacrosse sports fan, you got a lot going on, and it all starts on Wednesday. So interesting note, Steve, but that's just good for the schools. You would hate to have your school body and other people having to choose between boys or girls basketball.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that's a really good thing that the WIAA does to make sure that all these sports get watched equally. I mean, and just going for Division III, Wrightstown has the same issue. The boys are number 1 seed. They beat Northland Pines by 30 points on Saturday for a regional final, and now the girls play on Thursday as well for, I believe, and the boys play Xavier on Wednesday at Brilliant, as that was another team that you had mentioned. So just having to reschedule all these things, and hats off to Arcadia and Brilliant to be accommodating, to be able to host a game on Wednesday instead of their scheduled Thursday nights coming up.
In 90% of the state of Wisconsin, you can't sniff a high school anything game on Wednesday. Yeah. Now, though, we get to the playoffs, so we get 2 games on Wednesday, and that's just logistically the only way you can do it. You couldn't put them on a Tuesday. That's just too soon of a turnaround, and so Wednesday is the only day. So that's good, though, for us and sports fans across the area. We get to have playoffs Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week, and these are good times here. Good times in Wisconsin for sure. All right, so we mentioned that in Division 4, the 4-seed Luther playing the 7-seed Aquinas. Most of the attention was paid around Central Wisconsin to boys Division 4 over the weekend, and had been really since those pairings came out last year. We just saw those, and we were like, holy man, what a mess, and what a fantastic mess that's going to be. Before I tell you about Section 2, we'll finish up Section 1. It's number 1 seed Unity taking on number 2 seed Cameron at Amory on Thursday. All those games scheduled for 7 p.m. now, aside from that other oddball game down in the corner there. And then in sectional number 2, Iola Scandinavia and Lourdes Academy are the 1-2. Iola Scandinavia got past Winnebago Lutheran 89-65. Justin Sievertson in that game scored 43 points. Holy man. And then Lourdes Academy passed Shiocton 83-64. We thought that had a chance to be a close one. It turned out not to be, a 19-point game. And so now, Steve, Iola Scandinavia, Lourdes Academy over at Kimberly. And that's going to be a big time game over there. Yeah, and a rematch from last year's sectional semi between those two teams. A lot of people believe that Iola Scandinavia should have beaten Lourdes Academy, but a player that you had mentioned, Justin Sievertson, was off that night, and just Lourdes had beaten Iola and then beat Marathon on Saturday to make it to state and finish second. So Kimberly, a huge gym, should be packed up to the rafters. Iola travels very, very well. Oshkosh Lourdes right next in the Fox Valley, so it should be a great atmosphere, great matchup for number 1 Iola and number 2 Oshkosh Lourdes Academy. Good chance I will be at that game. More on that coming up later in today's show. All right, and then as we mentioned, Section 2, Division 4, that's where most of the interest in Central Wisconsin was since about July of last year, and as the months and days ticked off the calendar, that became more and more apparent that was where all the fun was going to be had. So we will start with games on Friday. It was Stratford over Pacelli, 66-40. Neilsville bested Marathon, 76-58. It was Edgar over Spencer, 62-38. And then Auburndale over Phillips, 79-46. So not a lot of intrigue there. The closest game of the night was Neilsville Marathon, 76-58. So an 18-point spread was our closest game. So as we ended the night on Friday, Steve, we thought, well, all right, maybe things get more exciting, but the teams were the better seed won fairly easily on Friday night. Yeah, and that's what you expect this time of the year, or at this time of the year, especially being at home as the higher seed, being able to have that home game and take down your opponent as easily as Stratford, Neilsville, Edgar, and Auburndale had done. All right, and then it was number 2 seed Auburndale hosting number 3 Edgar on Saturday night, and that was scheduled to be a very competitive game. It was Edgar, and I know Steve will correct me if I'm wrong here, so I'm not looking at my stats. I do this all by memory, folks, and I've got pretty much a lockbox on my shoulders, but every once in a while something slips out the back end. But Edgar had won a triple overtime. No, Auburndale won the triple overtime game at Edgar, and then Edgar beat Auburndale at Auburndale during the season. Thank you, and Steve's right here with me. And then it was Auburndale getting the better of the Wildcats. Steve, you called that game on Saturday. Tell us all about Auburndale 41-33 over Edgar.
Yeah, first half it didn't really look like it was going to be a 41-33. It was 18-12 at halftime.
Yeah.
And Austin Dahlke had 3 3-pointers in the first half for Edgar. Really very good defense by the Wildcats in the first half. They jumped out to a 24-12 lead in the second half. And then the big turning point, Cooper Weinfurter for Auburndale had 4 fouls about halfway through the second half. And then his teammates picked him up extremely well, played very good defense. Hunter Wright, Dylan Pawn, Fletcher Rabb, they all came out and held the Wildcats to just 15 points in the second half and were able to get over the hump and claim the regional final. Fantastic basketball game when your number one player is out with foul trouble like Auburndale was.
And then in the top half of that bracket on Saturday night, it was number 1 seed Stratford, number 4 seed Neillsville. And that was a game a lot of folks looked forward to from both of those communities and just innocent bystanders around the area. They thought that was a really intriguing game. I thought coming into it that there were just mismatch troubles for Neillsville really across the board. And the Warriors have some outstanding basketball players. And the Clover Belt got to find that out this year. But Neillsville got to find out that Stratford is a really good team, one of the top teams in the state for a reason. Those matchup troubles reared their head right from the beginning. Stratford jumped out to, I believe, a big 12-2 or 16-4 lead right off the bat, and they ran away with it on Saturday night, 71-36. And what that means is we have got Stratford-Auburndale version 3.0 as Merriwood South rivals will go at it again. The game is scheduled to be played at Wausau West. Game tips at 7 p.m. and it's Steve. It's Stratford Auburndale. You've got to see bits and pieces. I think you were at one of those games in total during the regular season. And Steve Maves will call that game Stratford Auburndale, and the third time around.
Well, and now Stratford took it to Auburndale the first time at Stratford, a little bit closer at Auburndale. Stratford pulled away late in the second half of their second game, and now being at a neutral site, having about 6 or 5 days to rest, get your mind set, get your mind ready. It's going to be interesting to see the mindset that Stratford has going into the postseason. They kind of lulled their way at times through the regular season. They had a 26-point win over Pacelli, a huge win over Neillsville. It's just a group of guys that know how to turn it on in the postseason. They did it in baseball last year. They did it in football this year. And see what the Apaches can do, see what their game plan will be against the athleticism and the height and physicality of the Stratford Tigers. It's going to be a great game, great atmosphere. Wausau West is a great gym to be able to host the sectional semifinal in.
Yeah, absolutely is. In the back page of Division 4, I guess what we'll call it around here, although down in the south they call it the front page. But all the 1 seeds are still alive over there. Cuba City, Roncalli, Milwaukee Science, and Palmyra Eagle. So all the 1 seeds are still alive down there. So what that probably means is that there's a good chance somebody's one will come out of there, or 2 of them even for that matter, and participate in the state finals. We'll keep you updated on that over the week. As always, ZaleskiSports.com. Great place to check out the scores and get the updates there. All right, moving over to Division 5 in Section 1, it's number 1 seed Luck, number 6 Northwood going at it there, number 1 Thorpe, and number 2 McDonald Central Catholic. It is number 1 seed Wasaki and number 2 seed Wabeno Leona in Section 2, and that brings us to a couple of local favorites and a really interesting bracket over there. And the number 1 seed was Almond Bancroft. The number 2 seed was Wild Rose, but they did not make it through, Steve. And there was a shot that Almond Bancroft was going to drop the regional semifinal against Loyal. They were trailing by 8 at half. They do overcome Loyal in the end, 52-41. but they weren't able to pull off any magic against the Pittsville Panthers. And the Pittsville Panthers are regional champions as they upend the Allman-Bancroft Eagles 62-49. Surprised about that, Steve?
Well, Pittsville has been really hot the last about month and a half. At the end of the regular season, they had given Almond a couple of great games. I think they beat Almond. I think they played Almond very close in the regular season. As you mentioned, I saw Almond take down Loyal. It was 30-22 at halftime. They only allowed Loyal 12 points in the second half. So very athletic team in Almond, not a lot of shooters, and Pittsville just had the right game plan. Took down the Eagles. Very interesting that Almond even got the number 1 seed because Wild Rose won the conference, and Wild Rose fell to Rib Lake, a team that you've seen a couple times.
I have.
And the Wildcats lose in their regional final as well.
As Steve mentioned, I saw Rib Lake lose to Auburndale and Stratford, and I came away with both of those games, and I said, this is a really good team. Division 5 team. Well, there they are, and the Rib Lake Redmen will play Pittsville in a sectional semifinal. That is at DC Everest, and you can watch the game live at ZaleskiSports.com. Breaking news, but it will be live on Thursday at 7 p.m. Rib Lake, they went chalk, though, all the way through as they took down the 14-seed Assumption squad. They took down 11 Newman Catholic. And then they did get by the number 2 seed Wild Rose. I don't know. Rib Lake may have been underseeded in that way as well. They maybe should have been the 2.
Well, and that's what you had told me after the couple games that you saw them earlier this year. You went up to their coach afterwards and said, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw you guys later on down the road, and that's exactly what's going to be happening. Rib Lake and Pittsville, 2 teams that a lot of people probably didn't predict would be in a sectional semifinal, but that's why you play the game at this point of the year, number 4 seed, number 3 seed, going at it for a chance to play a game to go to state. And so I mean, one of those 2 teams, Pittsville, Rib Lake, is going to have an opportunity to go to state next Saturday against Wasaki or Wabeno Leona in a sectional final.
Yeah, I told Coach Ewan, Rib Lake head coach, I told her, I said, I expect to see you at the Kohl Center. Yeah. I'm going to be there. I expect to see you there, and they're that close. But the Pittsville Panthers are equally as close, and fantastic Coach Dennison and others there. I would gladly shake hands with either Coach Ewan or Coach Dennison at the Kohl Center, and that would be a lot of fun to see. All right, Division 5 also, Bangor Blair Taylor will square off. Wazeeka Steuben and Potosi will square off. Hustaford and Sheboygan Lutheran will go at it, and Monticello and Randolph will also pair up on the back end of the Division 5 boys basketball bracket. No surprise here, Steve. In Division 2, it's Onalaska Lacrosse Central for the 3rd time. You get down to Lacrosse Logan for that game on Thursday. That will be a good one. Just kind of breezing through. Mosinee will take on Hortonville also, and that game is at Wausau East. So basketball fans in central Wisconsin, you've got sectional semifinals at Wausau East, Wausau West, and DC Everest. So if you can't make it to a basketball game on Thursday night, there is something wrong with you.
And there's a sectional semi at Lincoln as well.
Then there would be something wrong with you if you can't get there.
Kimberly and Eau Claire North.
Yep, and that is Division 1 at Kimberly and the Eau Claire North Huskies at Rapids Lincoln. Chippewa Falls and Neenah will go at it over at Appleton East. That game's still scheduled there. There's some talk about having Shy High make the drive all the way over to East, and Neenah's just got to drive up Highway 41. I don't know, though, there's any dance partner in the between those 2 schools. I believe that will stay at Appleton East. Neenah took down Marshfield to get there, 63-49. Marshfield kept it close. They led it at points in that game, but just not able to overcome Max Klesmet, Division I recruit to Wofford, and the rest of the Neenah Rockets. That game was on Saturday. That was a regional final. Marshfield had took down Spash in the semifinal. It was DC Everest over Wisconsin Rapids Lincoln, 86-67, before Everest was knocked off by Chippewa Falls. And Division 1, Brookfield Central still alive. Some of the others, I'm going to go back to Division 2 here. So we jump around just a bit and get ready to bring this son of a gun in for a landing here today. 30 minutes just flies by. But there's old Nicolay and Jalen Johnson sitting over there the number 1 seed. They'll take on Whitefish Bay. If there was a different game in the state that you'd want to have a look at, that would be one that I would recommend. But before we close out boys basketball, I'll turn it back to Steve and final comments or corrections.
Yeah, well, just looking, as you mentioned, out in Alaska and Lacrosse Central for the third time. I think they split earlier, or they split during the season. Should be a fantastic game with those two teams. On Alaska has been the number 1 seed, or the number 1 ranked team all season long. Lacrosse Central has 4 or 5 losses to some very, very good teams. Nicolay jumped up to the number 2 ranked team of the state in Division II. So it would be interesting to see how these games figure out, and going to be a fantastic week of basketball, as you mentioned, Wednesday through Saturday, and then back at it again for state tournament on the boys' side next weekend. All games live at ZaleskiSports.com. It all starts Thursday with Stratford and Auburndale and Pittsville and Rib Lake, both games live at ZaleskiSports.com. Steve, we real quick here, we'll end with UW Stevens Point men's hockey falling in their conference championship game to UW Eau Claire, 2-4 or 4-2, however you want to look at it there. Now the Pointers await their bid in the NCAA tournament. They will likely host a first-round game that is on March 14th. The highlights of the Pointers Blue Golds men's hockey game on Facebook at Zaleski Sports Wisconsin. All game highlights on the Zaleski Sports Facebook network. For Steve Maves, Jason Zaleski here telling you to have a great week. Go Sports.